alien intelligence reports warn that humans practice killing techniques recreationally. Part 1. His third eye twitched as he watched the surveillance footage for the seventh time. The Galactic Concordance intelligence officer had seen many strange things in his 40 cycles of service, but nothing quite like this. On the screen, thousands of humans packed into a massive arena, screaming and cheering as two nearly naked males attacked each other with their bare hands inside a wire cage. He paused the feed and zoomed in. The combatants were bleeding. One had a cut above his eye that leaked red fluid down his face. The other's nose appeared broken, yet neither stopped fighting. The crowd grew louder with each strike, their primitive vocal cords producing sounds that the translation software labeled as excitement and bloodlust. His tentacles curled in distress. His species, had evolved past physical violence 12,000 years ago. Most concordance races had similar histories. Once a civilization developed sufficient technology and social structures, organized combat became obsolete. Warriors became unnecessary. Fighting was remembered only in historical archives as a barbaric phase of development. But these humans were different. He opened another file. This one showed a smaller building with padded floors. Dozens of small humans, barely old enough to be considered juveniles, stood in neat rows. They wore matching white uniforms with colored belts. An adult human stood at the front, demonstrating a kick aimed directly at head height. The children mimicked the motion in unison, their small legs snapping through the air with disturbing precision. "They're teaching their young," muttered, his translator device rendering his clicks and whistles into concordant standard. "They're systematically training their offspring in combat techniques." He pulled up another video. This one featured a human female, elderly by their standards, moving through a series of graceful motions. The description called it Tai Chi. At first, felt relief. Perhaps this was art, like the movement meditation practiced by the monks. But as he ran the footage through combat analysis software, the results made his blood run cold. Every single motion was a disguised strike, block, or joint lock. The software identified 37 different techniques that could cause serious injury or death. The elderly female was practicing killing movements, and she did it every morning in a public park, surrounded by others doing the same. Spent the next several days compiling data. The more he discovered, the worse it became. Humans had created hundreds of different fighting systems. They called them martial arts and treated them with reverence. Some were thousands of years old, passed down through generations like precious cultural treasures. Others were new, hybrid systems that combined the deadliest techniques from multiple traditions. There were schools for these martial arts in every human settlement. Citizens paid their own resources to attend classes where they learned to punch, kick, grapple, and use weapons. The instructors held positions of respect in their communities. Many humans trained for years, earning ranks and titles that others admired. What disturbed most was the casualness of it all. Humans discussed their training the way discussed painting or music. They formed friendships at these combat schools. They brought their children. They posted videos of themselves practicing on their communication networks, proudly displaying their ability to hurt others. He found footage of competitions where humans traveled from across their planet to fight each other while judges watched and scored their performance. The winners received trophies and prize money. The losers often left on stretchers, injured but apparently willing to return and try again. Discovered something called boxing, where humans repeatedly struck each other's heads with padded fists. Medical studies in the human's own databases showed this caused brain damage over time. Yet millions participated anyway. They called the best fighters champions and treated them as heroes. There was wrestling, where humans tried to pin each other to the ground using complex holds and throws. There was that combined punches and leg strikes. There was judo, focused on throws and submissions. There was karate with its precise strikes and kata forms. There was something called Brazilian that specialized in choking opponents unconscious or breaking their joints. The list went on and on. Thai, Taekwondo, Kung, Maga. Each system had its own philosophy and techniques, but all shared the same purpose: teaching humans how to defeat other humans in physical combat. Found instruction manuals, millions of them, available for anyone to access. Videos demonstrated exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. Books explained human anatomy with diagrams showing vulnerable points. Forums discussed training methods and sparring techniques. The entire species had democratized deadly knowledge. But perhaps most alarming was the entertainment industry built around combat. Humans produced thousands of movies and shows featuring fighters. They paid enormous sums to watch professional athletes compete in brutal matches. Children grew up watching animated programs where heroes solved problems with fighting. Video games let players practice combat virtually, rewarding them for defeating opponents. Violence wasn't just tolerated in human society, it was celebrated, packaged, sold, turned into recreation. Research revealed that humans had always been this way. Their entire evolutionary history was marked by warfare and combat. They had developed agriculture, mathematics, art, and philosophy, yes, but they had never stopped fighting. Even as their technology advanced, even as they reached toward the stars, they continued to practice and perfect their ability to hurt each other. The intelligence officer compiled everything into a comprehensive report. He included video evidence, statistical analysis, and cultural context. He highlighted the concerning patterns: the systematic training of youth, the glorification of violence in media, the competitive nature of combat sports, and the casual acceptance of fighting as a normal part of life. His conclusion was stark. Humanity represented a unique threat to galactic peace. While most species had a warrior class or military force for defense, humans had weaponized their entire population. Every individual was a potential combatant. They trained voluntarily, often from childhood, in techniques designed to maim and kill. Worse, they seemed to enjoy it. They smiled while training. They laughed after sparring matches even when injured. They spoke fondly of their instructors and training partners. They described the pain and exhaustion of practice as rewarding and character building. Had studied many pre-contact civilizations, but he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't violent because they lacked alternatives or education. They were advanced enough for space travel, had rich cultures and complex philosophies. They chose to maintain their warrior traditions alongside their technological progress. He titled his report Critical Threat Assessment: Human Recreational Combat Culture, and flagged it for immediate High Council review. As he transmitted the file, felt his tentacles trembling. The Concordance would need to decide how to handle this discovery. Could they make contact with a species that practiced killing as a hobby? Could they trust diplomatic relations with beings who taught their children to fight before they taught them mathematics? What would happen if humans brought their combat culture into galactic society? The questions kept awake through his rest cycle. On his screen, the frozen image of two cage fighters stared back at him, fists raised, blood on their faces, thousands of cheering humans in the background. The galaxy was about to learn about humanity. Just hoped they were ready for what that meant. Part 2. The emergency session of the Galactic Concordance High Council convened within hours of receiving's report. The circular chamber, built to accommodate the diverse physiologies of its member species, buzzed with agitated conversation. Delegates from 47 worlds floated, sat, or stood at their designated stations, all reviewing the same disturbing data. Ambassador of the Peaceful Collective was the first to speak. His species, resembled tall crystalline structures that communicated through light patterns. Now those patterns flashed an angry red. "This is exactly the kind of species our founders warned us about," declared, his words translated into each delegate's native tongue. A civilization that celebrates violence, that teaches its young to kill, that turns combat into entertainment. We must implement full quarantine protocols immediately. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. High Arbiter Al, a serpentine who had led the council for 2 decades, raised one clawed hand for silence. Her scales shifted to a neutral blue, the color of careful consideration. "Let us not rush to judgment," she said, though her tone carried uncertainty. "Every species has violent origins. Perhaps we are misinterpreting their cultural context." Misinterpreting? Lights flashed brighter. Did we not all watch the same footage? Thousands of humans gathered to watch 2 of their own beat each other bloody. Children learning to strike killing blows. Elderly citizens practicing combat in public spaces. There is no context that makes this acceptable. Counselor of the Dominion spoke next. His species were massive, bear-like beings with thick fur and considerable strength, yet even they had abandoned physical combat generations ago. "My science team analyzed the human combat systems," said, his deep voice rumbling. "They are sophisticated, refined over thousands of years. The humans understand leverage, anatomy, physics. They have turned violence into a science and then taught that science to their entire population. This level of martial knowledge distributed across a whole species is unprecedented." A smaller delegate, Pip of the Compact, raised a tentacle. Her species were peaceful herbivores, resembling Earth's hedgehogs but sapient and barely 3 feet tall. "Have we confirmed they use these skills against each other regularly?" Pip asked. "Perhaps the training is merely ceremonial, maintained as tradition but rarely applied." Attending the session as the primary researcher, activated his display. New data filled the viewing screens throughout the chamber. "Unfortunately, no," he said. "Human crime statistics show significant rates of assault. Many humans possess weapons in their homes. Their history is marked by continuous warfare. Even in their current era of relative stability, regional conflicts continue. The martial training is not ceremonial. It reflects a species that remains comfortable with violence." High Arbiter Al studied the data with growing concern. What of their military forces? Surely they must be smaller than average if the entire population maintains combat readiness. "Quite the opposite," replied. "Humans maintain large standing armies equipped with sophisticated weapons. Their military personnel receive additional specialized combat training beyond what civilians learn. Some human nations require mandatory military service for all citizens. The recreational martial arts exist alongside, not instead of, organized military forces." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates spoke over each other, their concern now bordering on panic. A species with both a fully militarized warrior culture and a trained civilian population was unprecedented in concordance records. Al called for order again. "Intelligence officer, you recommend quarantine." "I recommend caution," said carefully. "Humanity possesses space-faring capability. They have already established settlements on their moon and sent probes beyond their solar system. We cannot quarantine them indefinitely. Eventually, they will develop faster-than-light travel and discover they are not alone in the universe. Better we control that first contact than let it happen randomly." "First contact with warriors," Ambassador said darkly. "You propose we invite violence into the concordance itself." Before Al could respond, Senior Counselor spoke for the first time. The ancient rarely participated in debates, preferring to observe and offer wisdom only when necessary. Her species were energy beings, barely visible as shimmering clouds of light. When spoke, everyone listened. "Send observers," she said simply. "Do not judge from distance. Walk among them, understand them." The council debated for hours but ultimately agreed with wisdom. A covert observation team would be dispatched to Earth with advanced disguise technology. They would integrate into human society, attend their combat schools, interview their warriors, and determine whether humanity was truly as dangerous as the data suggested. The team consisted of 6 specialists from different fields: military analysis, sociology, psychology, medical science, and risk assessment. They arrived on Earth 3 months later, their ship hidden on the dark side of the moon, their bodies concealed by holographic disguises that made them appear perfectly human. Team leader alike established their base in a human city called San Francisco. From there, the team dispersed to gather information. Doctor, the team's psychologist, enrolled in something called a mixed martial arts gym. He documented his first class with growing horror. Humans of all ages and genders paired up and spent an hour trying to choke each other unconscious or hyperextend each other's joints. They called it rolling and smiled the entire time. When Doctor's partner accidentally elbowed him in the face, the human immediately apologized and checked if he was okay, then suggested they continue. The contradiction baffled him. Researcher attended a children's karate class. She watched young humans, some barely old enough to walk properly, learn to punch and kick with proper form. But she also noticed something unexpected. The instructor spent more time teaching respect, discipline, and self-control than actual fighting. Students bowed to each other. They helped younger children with their techniques. When one child hurt another by accident, both the child and the instructor treated it as a serious matter requiring apology and care. Military analyst Quar attended a professional boxing match. He witnessed 2 humans spend 12 rounds systematically trying to render each other unconscious while thousands cheered. The violence was undeniable, but afterward the fighters embraced. They spoke respectfully of each other in interviews. They thanked their trainers, their families, and each other. The winner helped the loser to his feet. They would fight again someday, they said, and looked forward to it. Medical officer interviewed doctors at human hospitals. She learned that combat sports had strict rules and medical oversight. Referees stopped fights if someone was too injured. Athletes received regular health screenings. Training facilities maintained safety protocols. Yes, injuries occurred, but humans studied those injuries and developed better protective equipment, better rules, better medical care. They didn't want participants to die or suffer permanent damage. They wanted safe violence, if such a thing could exist. Sociologists attended a traditional Kung school, one that had existed for 300 years. The master there spoke of martial arts as a path to enlightenment. Students meditated before training. They studied philosophy. They learned that true mastery meant never needing to fight. The techniques were taught, yes, but the ultimate goal was internal peace and harmony. The master had trained for 60 years and claimed he had never used his skills to actually hurt anyone outside the training hall. Risk assessor compiled crime statistics and compared them to other species at similar developmental stages. Surprisingly, human violence rates were not significantly higher. They had laws against assault. They prosecuted those who used violence illegally. Most humans never used their martial training in actual combat. The training and the application seemed somehow separated in their culture. After 3 months, the team gathered to compile their findings. The data was contradictory and confusing. Yes, humans trained in violence. Yes, they celebrated combat. Yes, they maintained these traditions across their entire civilization. But they also valued control, respect, and discipline. They hurt each other in controlled environments but cared for each other afterward. They taught deadly techniques but emphasized never using them outside proper contexts. They're paradoxical, Doctor concluded. They simultaneously embrace and restrain their violent nature. I've never seen anything like it. Team leader prepared their report for the High Council. As he wrote, he realized that humanity wasn't more violent than other species had been at similar stages. They were simply more honest about their nature. They acknowledged their capacity for harm and created elaborate systems to channel it safely. But was that enough? Could the Concordance trust a species that found joy in controlled combat? Would humans bring their warrior culture into galactic society? The report was ready. The team prepared to return home. Soon the High Council would need to make a decision that would affect both humanity and the entire galaxy. Contact or quarantine, trust or fear. The choice would define everything that came next. Part 3. 6 months after receiving the observation team's report, the Galactic Concordance made its decision. They would initiate first contact, but they would do so carefully, with heavy security protocols and contingency plans for every possible scenario where human violence might emerge. 3 Concordance vessels entered Earth's solar system, their arrival deliberately obvious to human detection systems. They wanted to be seen. They wanted humanity to have time to prepare. Within hours, every human government knew they were no longer alone in the universe. The Concordance chose Geneva as the meeting location, neutral ground where human nations had historically gathered for diplomacy. The ships landed in a prepared area outside the city, while billions of humans watched through their communication networks. High Arbiter Al led the delegation herself, accompanied by ambassador, counselor, and a dozen others including and several members of the observation team. They emerged from their ships with visible weapon systems active, shields raised, and security personnel flanking every delegate. The human delegation waited in the designated meeting area. They looked confused by the aggressive posture. At their center stood Ambassador Sarah, an older human female with gray hair and calm eyes. She had been briefed that aliens existed and were here to make contact, but clearly no one had explained why the visitors looked ready for war. The two groups faced each other across 50 meters of open ground. Al's scales flickered through several colors before settling on diplomatic purple. She spoke through translation devices that converted her hissing into human languages. Greetings, humanity. We are the Galactic Concordance, a coalition of 47 spacefaring civilizations. We have come to discuss your species' eligibility for membership in galactic society. Ambassador bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. We are honored by your presence and eager to join the greater community of sapient life. How may we demonstrate our readiness? Ambassador's lights flashed an aggressive orange. By explaining why your civilization treats killing as entertainment. The human delegation froze. Several exchanged confused glances. Ambassador's expression shifted from welcoming to wary. I'm sorry, could you clarify? Stepped forward and activated a holographic display. Video footage appeared in the air between the two groups, humans fighting in cages, children learning to kick and punch, Tai Chi practitioners in parks, boxing matches, karate tournaments, Kung demonstrations, all the evidence the Concordance had gathered. Your species practices combat recreationally, said. You train your young in lethal techniques. You celebrate violence in your media and culture. You have democratized deadly knowledge across your entire population. We need to understand why before we can trust you among other species. Ambassador watched the footage in silence. Then, to the absolute horror of every alien present, she laughed. Not a cruel laugh or mocking, but genuine amusement. Several other humans in her delegation smiled. I apologize, said, composing herself, but you fundamentally misunderstood what you're seeing. Misunderstood, Ambassador's lights flashed brighter. We watched humans beat each other bloody for sport. We watched children learn to kill. We documented your entire warrior culture. What is there to misunderstand? Ambassador gestured to her delegation. May I introduce some people who can explain better than I can? She brought forward an elderly Asian man who moved with careful grace. This is Sensei. He has studied Aikido for 50 years. Sensei bowed deeply to the aliens. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Aikido is a martial art, yes. Its techniques come from combat, but I have never used Aikido to hurt anyone. I teach students to redirect aggression, to find harmony with opponents rather than destroy them. I have spent 50 years learning how not to fight. The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. Sensei continued. Many martial arts began as fighting systems, but they evolved. They became ways to improve ourselves, to understand our bodies, to connect with tradition. The combat techniques are there, yes, but for most practitioners, actually fighting is not the goal. Ambassador brought forward two younger humans, both athletic and confident. These are Olympic wrestlers, and they've competed at the highest level of their sport. Spoke first. Wrestling is thousands of years old. It's in the Olympics, but I've never been in an actual fight outside the mat. Wrestling taught me discipline, gave me confidence, helped me make friends. Yeah, technically I'm learning to take people down and pin them, but it's a game with rules and referees and safety protocols. It's not violence, it's sport. Nodded. My best friend is someone I competed against in 3 Olympic trials. We've spent hundreds of hours trying to beat each other, but there's no hatred there. It's respect. It's pushing each other to be better. The physicality is real, but so is the sportsmanship. Another human stepped forward, a muscular woman with several scars. I compete in mixed martial arts, the cage fighting you showed. Yes, it looks brutal. Yes, we're really fighting. But it's consensual, regulated, and medical staff are always present. We sign contracts, we have rules, we tap out when we're caught in submissions. I've been choked unconscious and broken my arm, but I chose to compete knowing the risks. It's no different than humans who climb mountains or race cars. We accept danger in pursuit of excellence. Doctor, a human biologist, stepped forward next. May I explain the neurological and evolutionary context? Al gestured for her to continue. The arbiter's scales had shifted to uncertain gray. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tribal competitors, Doctor explained. Violence is part of our evolutionary heritage, but so is empathy, cooperation, and social bonding. We're paradoxical creatures. Martial arts and combat sports let us satisfy ancient instincts in controlled, socially acceptable ways. She activated her own display, showing brain scans and neurological data. When humans engage in martial arts training or watch combat sports, we experience neurochemical releases, endorphins, dopamine, adrenaline. These are the same chemicals our ancestors experienced during hunting or tribal conflicts. Training satisfies those old urges without requiring actual violence. Doctor's expression grew serious. But here's what makes humans unique. We can satisfy our aggressive instincts while simultaneously learning discipline, respect, and self-control. Martial arts don't make us more violent. Studies show they often make us less violent. Practitioners learn consequences, develop empathy through sparring with partners, and gain confidence that reduces the need to prove themselves through actual fighting. She gestured to the videos still hovering in the air. You see children learning to punch. I see children learning self-control, respect for instructors, and how to fall safely. You see cage fighters drawing blood. I see athletes who follow rules, tap out when caught, and embrace after matches. You see elderly people practicing combat movements. I see a form of moving meditation that keeps them healthy. Ambassador spoke again. Most civilizations probably suppress their aggressive instincts or remain controlled by them. Humans found a third path. We acknowledge our capacity for violence, but we channel it into constructive activities. We ritualize it, regulate it, and separate it from actual harm. Counselor the Massive spoke thoughtfully. Your warriors never use their skills. Our warriors looked confused, then understood. Oh, no, most people who practice martial arts aren't warriors. They're teachers, doctors, engineers, parents. They train a few hours a week and never use the techniques outside the gym. Those who compete professionally treat it as sport, not warfare. Our actual military is separate, specialized, and subject to strict legal oversight. Sensei added quietly, the highest level of martial arts is to never need to fight, to be capable of violence but choose peace. That is what I have spent my life learning. The alien delegation stood in silence, processing this information. Ambassador's lights had shifted from aggressive orange to confused purple. even felt his certainty wavering. High Arbiter Al spoke carefully. You are saying that your species practices combat not to become better at violence, but to better control your violent nature. Exactly, Ambassador said. We don't practice killing techniques recreationally. We practice discipline, fitness, sport, and cultural tradition through activities that happen to be rooted in combat. It's the difference between learning something and using it. Doctor, the concordance psychologist who had attended the MMA gym, stepped forward from the alien delegation. She's right. I observed this directly. Humans spar intensely but care for their partners. They push each other to limits but stop before serious harm. They've created elaborate systems to satisfy violent urges while maintaining social bonds. It's actually quite sophisticated. Researcher added, the children's classes emphasize character development more than fighting ability. Respect, discipline, perseverance. The combat techniques are vehicles for teaching values. Ambassador smiled. Exactly. My daughter took karate for 10 years. She learned to punch and kick, yes, but she also learned to bow, to call her instructor sensei, to help younger students to push through difficulty. She's now a pediatric surgeon. She's never been in a fight, but karate made her who she is. High Arbiter Al's scales slowly shifted to a thoughtful blue-green. We may have made an error in judgment. You saw violence where we see tradition, Ambassador said. You saw danger where we see discipline. You saw a warrior culture where we see a diverse civilization that happens to maintain some warrior traditions. Yes, humans can be violent, but we're also capable of tremendous compassion, cooperation, and peace. The martial arts don't contradict that. They're part of how we balance our nature. Counselor, the ancient energy being, shimmered brightly. The humans have learned what few species achieve. They are honest about their darkness and have made it serve their light. This is wisdom. The mood shifted. Alien delegates who had been tense began to relax. Weapons systems powered down. Shields dropped. Ambassador offered a traditional human gesture, extending her hand toward Al. Shall we start over? Asked. I promise we're not as scary as your intelligence reports suggested. Al couldn't shake hands, but she bowed her serpentine head in respect. We have much to learn about each other. Perhaps that is the purpose of first contact, not to confirm our assumptions, but to challenge them. Over the following days, the two delegations talked extensively. Humans explained their culture, their history, their hopes for joining galactic society. The aliens shared knowledge of the wider universe, offered technology exchanges, and began the process of formally welcoming humanity to the concordance. Ambassador remained skeptical, but admitted his initial assessment had been incomplete. Counselor expressed fascination with human martial arts and asked if he might observe a class. Several delegates accepted Ambassador's half-serious offer to try Tai Chi, curious about this strange practice of finding peace through the study of war. Compiled a revised report titled Human Paradox: Violence as a Path to Peace. In it, he detailed how humanity's unique approach to their aggressive instincts might actually offer insights for other species. Perhaps some of the concordance races had suppressed too much of their natures. Perhaps there was wisdom in the human way of acknowledging darkness while choosing light. On the day the alien delegation departed, Sensei presented High Arbiter Al with a gift, a white belt, the beginning rank in Aikido, and an invitation to visit whenever she wished to learn. The first lesson, said with a gentle smile, is that true strength is not the absence of violence. It is the choice of peace despite the capacity for violence. Al accepted the gift with gratitude. As her ship lifted off, she looked down at Earth and thought about the billions of humans below. They were warriors, yes, but they were also teachers, healers, artists, scientists, and dreamers. They had taken the most violent parts of their nature and transformed them into sports, traditions, and philosophies. The galaxy had been afraid of human violence, but perhaps what they should have admired was human wisdom, the ability to be dangerous and choose to be kind. the strength to train for war while building peace. Humanity would bring their martial traditions to the stars, but they would also bring their discipline, their restraint, and their hard-won understanding that knowing how to fight and choosing when to fight were what truly separated civilization from barbarism. The Concordance had learned an important lesson, and humanity had taken its first step toward the stars, ready to teach the galaxy what it meant to be both warrior and peacemaker, to practice killing techniques recreationally while building a civilization of compassion. Some things, it turned out, could only be understood by walking among those you feared and learning that fear and respect were not the same thing at all.